Describe it as a ocean activist.
Ocean and conservation. Yeah.
Activist group.
We have 4 so far.
Oh, wait a minute.
Not sufficient.
It's 11 now. This is Jamie Court in Consumer Watchdog's headquarters in LA. We're going to get going in just 1 or 2 minutes. So bear with us, please. Just waiting for a couple of people. Hi, this is Jamie Court at Consumer Watchdog. We're getting going in 1 to 2 minutes.
No, it was just,
Okay, you guys ready?
yeah.
Okay.
More or less.
Okay, let me just check these slides. All right, so these slides go like this, Lisa. You see? When we do the slides, these slides, there's a little thing right here.
Oh, right there.
Yeah, we got one more camera setting up and we'll get going. Okay, this is Jamie Court and Consumer Watchdog's offices in LA. I want you to know if you're on the line, our conference line, and you want us, and you're not watching our video stream, which is on Vimeo, and you can get it. You got it from the advisory, but you're on the conference line. On our website, there is a press release. It's the first thing you're going to see if you click on the banner, and there is a slide presentation linked in that press release, and you can follow along with the slides we're going to be going through our website and the press release on that website. Or you could watch on Vimeo, which is in the press advisory, that address, and watch it so you can see the slides. But we are going to roll through a few slides in a minute. So we'll let this one camera set up and we will go. Okay? All right. And if you want the slides again and you've come on the conference line, which is muted now, we'll open it for questions later. What we're going to do is you can go to our website at consumerwatchdog.org, consumerwatchdog.org. Click on the banner headline. You'll get the press release. And under the press release, if you scroll down, there's both a download of the report and there is a download of the slide presentation, the PDF that you can use. So, we good? We got one more mic coming. Okay. We may need to make room for one more camera. We'll figure that out when they come. All right. All right, you guys ready? I think one is coming, one more is coming, so we're going to have to move a little. Yeah, they'll come in late and let's see what happens, right? Okay, great. Okay, we're going to get going. Thank you all for your patience. If you're on the conference line and you want to ask a question, we will open the questions at the end. We're good on sound? Okay, so thank you. I'm Jamie Court. I'm president of Consumer Watchdog. Thank you all for coming here today for the release of the report on recycling. The report author, Lisa Tucker, is with me today. And we have Andrea Leon Grossman, who is the Deputy Director of Azul, an ocean activist group and conservation group. And we're going to be talking today about recycling in California and what we can do to improve it and what the problems are for consumers. This report, which I am going to show you the cover of today, and again, if you're online, you can download this report from consumerwatchdog.org. This report is a compilation of a lot of research. We want to thank the Container Recycling Institute, which provided a lot of data on its website for this. And CalRecycle also has provided a lot of data, the state agency. It's a little buried, the data, but the data in this report comes from CalRecycle, comes from the Container Recycling Institute. So Californians plunk down a nickel for their cans every time they buy them in line and for their bottles. But increasingly, they're only getting half that nickel back on average. So this is the deposit, the 5-cent deposit that we give, and what happens to it, and why consumers can't redeem their empties is the subject of this report. The report then goes through recommendations in order to get the money back for the public. Fundamentally, even though the state says there is a 75% redemption rate, Consumer Watchdogs found that the real money that goes back into consumers' pockets is closer to 50% and may well be less. So what we're saying is when consumers pluck down a nickel, because of many factors we're going to walk through, and particularly the lack of recycling centers, they are not getting half that nickel back, or they're getting about half that nickel back. And the reason is others are turning in those empties for them. They're forced to throw the empties in curbside recycling. The trash haulers get paid for the empties. The bulk collectors, they call them gleaners, get paid for the empties. And consumers are basically forfeiting their money. And when you throw trash in the curbside bins, it's more contaminated by the time it gets to be recycled. A lot of it winds up in landfill. 25% of the bottles get broken. And so consumers are losing, the environment is losing, and global warming is coming. This report is an urgent cry for Governor Newsom and the legislature to fix the recycling system in California. There are 10 states with bottle deposit laws, and California is a cellar dweller. Cellar dweller. Michigan has a 92% redemption rate. Oregon has over 90%. These are states that do better. One of the reasons they do better is they have higher deposits, 10 cents. And we urge, as part of this report, for the governor to consider putting more money in this program with a higher deposit, a 10% deposit. We also urge the governor to try to set a 90% redemption rate as a goal for the state and make sure that anyone gets paid out of the fund, because our nickels and dimes pay for this fund. Anyone who takes money out of the recycling fund is achieving that 90% and working towards that 90%, and preferably that money is going back to the consumer directly. So let me walk through the numbers that this report has just to show you where we've come up with these figures and what happens to your money. The state says we've got $1.35 billion. This is all off the fact sheet in recyclables. Well, market research shows there's a lot more cans and bottles, like these bottles we have here, floating around than what's reported to the state. And every time the state does an audit, the beverage wholesalers, who are the ones who are getting the nickels from the consumer through the retailer, they go to the beverage wholesalers like Walmart or Coca-Cola, and they send those nickels to the state and account for them. Well, accounting scams in 1 year, according to the Container Recycling Institute, accounted for over $200 million of lost nickels and dimes for the recycling program that came from the consumers that beverage dealers never reported. And that's based on market research about the number of refundable bottles and cans out there versus what the state has accounted for. And every time the state's done an audit, we'll see in a minute, the auditors overwhelmingly find the beverage dealers and the retailers like Walmart serially undercount these deposits. So we lose $200 million a year right off the top for bad accounting. Then consumers have unclaimed deposits. Now this is a number reported by the state. A number reported by the state. $308 million is unclaimed of this money by consumers. And when, by the way, Cal Recycle responded to this, off their own fact sheet, this is where these numbers come from, Cal Recycle accounts for unclaimed deposits, but the way it reports it, and you can see it on its own fact sheet, is the unclaimed deposit number, which is about 4% lower, Cal Recycle's response to what we provided so far, is 4% lower because it doesn't account for the fact that the $308 million is lost from the consumers, and from this unclaimed deposit fund, Cal Recycling is taking 1.5% administrative fees for the recyclers, 1.5% administrative fees for the beverage distributors, 2.5% administrative fees for the program. All the administrative fees on its balance sheet are considered part of the unclaimed deposit fund, which has a lower balance. Well, we added the cost of those administrative fees back in because this is money that came from the $1.5 billion the consumers are putting into the fund. So we have money taken off the top. We have $308 million unclaimed. That's just unclaimed. When you add back in all the money that Cal Recycle doesn't account for the administrative fees that come off the fund. And then we have curbside collectors, which take in 12% of your empties, compared to 88% at the redemption centers. And that's $126 million lost because the trash haulers get paid for your redemption. They get paid fees on top of that by the program and by municipal grants, but you never get your money back. $126 million lost. Then we have conservatively estimated that others, gleaners, bulk collectors, bring back 10% of what comes to the recycling centers these days. That's $92 million lost. So what consumers redeem in the end is 831 million of 1.56 billion, which means there's $732 million lost roughly. That's 53% of the money that goes in, more than almost $750 million. These are all the sources on the next side for this ripoff. But again, first we're taking out the market research that shows there are more bottles and cans than are being reported by Walmarts and and Kmarts and those who are distributing, taking the nickels and telling the state about them. Then we find the actual amount of unclaimed consumer deposits by a number that the state publishes, but not allowing it to deduct administrative fees for the program, putting back those nickels and dimes that consumers pay, would come to 308 million. Then we find that the cash hauled in by the garbage haulers and the trash companies, at 12% of the redemptions is 126 million, and then we take out again the money that goes, and this is very conservative, to bulk collectors. I think the bulk collector number is far more than 10% of what comes in to those recycling centers, because most people don't bring it to the recycling center. And we come up with 2.65 cents of every nickel we plunk down is going back to the consumer, 5.3% of every dime. Now this isn't precise, but it is an estimate that shows we're losing potentially more than 50% of these deposits we plunk down. What's really interesting to me is this morning, after this report hit the wires, I got about 5 or 10 phone calls. I opened my phone, one in the middle of a radio interview, and it was garbage trucks backing up that would not stop. I tried to call them back, and they couldn't be called back. I think the trash haulers don't like that we're taking out the trash at Cal Recycle and revealing that curbside haulers are raking in too much of our money, and by the way, not doing a great job of recycling it, because that's more contaminated at the curbside than the redemption center. So those are the numbers, and we can answer questions about it, and I want to turn it over to talk about some of the problems, but the fundamental problem is there are too few redemption centers. 40% of the redemption centers have disappeared over the last 5 years, and that's a real number. Cal Recycle has 38%, but we have a real number at 40%. Regardless, we agree, too many redemption centers are gone. And the reason is Cal Recycle doesn't adjust payment formulas. Cal Recycle hasn't made recommendations about the increased minimum wage affecting these centers, higher rents. Cal Recycle, the state agency in charge of recycling, takes in all this money, this $1.5 billion, and whatever is not going back to consumers, it uses to make recycling work. Well, it needs to keep these centers open, but it's not being proactive. And in fact, its fund balance is over $300 million. It's sitting on reserves of $300 million. And it's not paying centers more. The haulers are making huge profits, huge, because they're getting it from the redemptions and they're getting it from grants and other fees. The beverage guys are getting the administrative fees, 1.5% off the top, and they're keeping a little extra for themselves, according to these audits. The consumer's the one left in the cold. And I'm going to turn it over to Lisa to talk a little bit about some of the specifics of the redemption center losses, the audits, and also the grocery change, because the grocery stores themselves increasingly aren't fulfilling their obligation to take back empties when they're in underserved areas, which are increasing. But our recommendations really are going to focus on the governor and Cal Recycle. Cal Recycle needs to be recycled. We have the greenest state in the nation, purportedly, and we have the dirtiest recycling program. We have the greenest state in the nation and what is the dirtiest recycling program. And Cal Recycle, the state agency in charge, is part of the problem. By the way, state audits have shown that Cal Recycle during the Brown administration, even prior to it, were taking money from the Cal Recycle fund and putting it in the general fund, over $500,000, using it as a piggy bank. And that's money that doesn't go to recycling. So Governor Newsom can do a fresh start here. Governor Newsom needs to pick up the broken pieces in this bottle deposit program and put them back together and make it work for the consumer and make it work for the environment. So I'm going to turn to Lisa to go through some of the specifics in the report, and then Andrea is going to talk about what it means for the community. She's also going to do a quick summary in Spanish, and we'll take some questions about the report. Okay, Lisa, please. Thank you.
Okay. think this is the right button, right, Jamie? Okay, so just very, very briefly, this is the counties that have lost the greatest number of centers in the last 5 years, and then you'll see in Los Angeles, they've lost over 100 centers. It's almost 1 in 5, and now serving 21,000 people. One center, 21,000 people, and so what's going on is these centers close. As people get frustrated, they put all of their empties in the trash. And that then it becomes more revenue for the recycler, the curbside haulers and the waste companies. So the Los Angeles, Sacramento, and San Diego are at the top of the list here. And that's a sad fact.
Use the other button if you need to go to the next one.
Hold on. Okay. So here you see the grocery store chains, the major ones. Okay. And what this chart is showing you is, as of 2018, how many convenience zones are they serving in the state? So the state's been carved up into about 4,000 convenience zones. That's how they basically look at this map of California, and each one is theoretically supposed to have at least one redemption center. And grocery store chains are actually obligated statutorily to help make that happen. They're all run by independent companies, but the grocery stores are supposed to help make it happen, and including putting some right on their premises, renting space to them. And the problem here is that you'll see that there are, it says here, number of exempt zones. So these grocers and their lobbyists have been very, very good at getting, quote, exemptions from having to basically try to set up a center. The reasons for that are varied, but one of them is if they say that it looks like their customers prefer to simply throw away their bottles into the trash, which should not really count as an exemptable reason. And you'll see Albertsons and Safeway and Walmart, okay, and Sam's Club. They have 102 exemptions at Albertsons. They have 103 and 3 at Walmart. And you'll see when you look at the total percentage of these zones not served, Walmart is not serving 73% of 4,000 convenience zones, okay? Albertsons, 68%, more than 2/3.
Hold on a second, Lisa, 1 second while he sets up his mic.
Sure.
And do we have someone else who needs to set up a mic real quick, or there's another camera coming? You're good? All right, we don't want to lose other people's mics.
No, I just want to be able to press on here. These stores should not have exemptions. There is no reason for them to have exemptions. Some of these exemptions date back to literally when the bottle bill was passed in the mid-1980s. They should all be revisited on a timely basis and yanked, because just the convenience of throwing stuff into the trash can is not a reason not to have a redemption center. So that's number one. I'm pressing this.
What about the long-term recommendation at least?
Well, the long-term recommendation is that these stores, a lot of them are they're supposed to be paying fees to the state if they choose not to set up or help set up a redemption center. And many of them just aren't. They're not taking the bottles back. So one recommendation is make all these major chains take the bottles back, in addition to funding the recycling centers themselves to the proper levels so that we can get more of them going. But not only should we take away the exemptions, but they should all have to go ahead and take back bottles. How come this isn't going to the next? It's right here.
Lost the.
Hold on a second. We're just trying to scroll through the charts.
John, can you
here.
come here a second? No, let's take it out here.
We're not getting a connection here. We're just scrolling through charts, and we'll be with you in a second.
Well, the next one was about the audits.
Yeah.
Lisa,
So according
that?
to Cal Recycle, they.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, I know why. Is the mouse is being crushed by the.
Okay. All right.
Let's
So
try it
let's
now.
just try it again. All right.
All right, let's go to the next one. Then.
Okay. No, hold on, John.
Try to. There we go. Okay, good. Thanks, John.
Wait a second. It's not.
So this is the one of the California
The audits. The audit chart.
There you go.
Yeah, okay, so in 2016,
Thank
Cal
you.
Recycle reviewed, audited a total of 66 of these major beverage distributors and retailers. And it found that 50 out of 66 companies had held back deposits and other fees, okay, from the state totaling almost $18 million. Walmart was responsible for $14.5 million of those dollars. And they do this by, underreporting, miscoding the products that should be subject to the deposit, all kinds of different ways. But the problem with this is that CalRecycle doesn't publicize this stuff. And it doesn't fine these companies. So companies that basically are caught underreporting ought to be fined. And Walmart didn't even get a wrist slap fine. It simply had to pay up what it owed, and it really kind of was not that well publicized. The others weren't publicized at all. So we reviewed 5 years worth of their press releases, and they publicized scams, but not scams on this side of the ledger with the retailers and the distributors. So that's another thing that we want to emphasize, is that has to change. Oh, and they have to do a lot more audits. They're only auditing something like 1% to 2% at best, which is way under auditing. They could be generating millions and millions of dollars more for this program and for consumers and for redemption centers if they did this properly.
Don't touch that.
Anything
That's
else?
the phone.
Are we done?
One more slide over.
Okay, so here are the counties with the most scarce redemption centers right now. So if you happen to be lucky enough to live in Marin and you're going to try to recycle your bottles, well, you've only got 2 to choose from. And one recycling center is serving 131,000 people, okay? So of course you're going to get frustrated standing in a long line. You're going to throw your stuff out, and the trash haulers are going to benefit from that. They're going to basically get your redemption money, and they're going to contaminate what they pick up so that it becomes something they have to landfill. By the way, they're getting revenue from landfilling in addition to actual subsidies from CalRecycle on top. They get, they're getting the revenue from the landfilling, and it's kind of conflict of interest, really. So that's another thing that has to basically be looked at. So Marin, San Francisco, Sonoma, they have the most scarce redemption centers. It's all kind of going on, central and to north California. So that's it. If you have other questions, we'll answer them.
Okay, now I'm going to introduce Andrea Leon Grossman, who's the Deputy Director of Azul.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk about the repercussions of having a system that is failing us in terms of recycling. When there's not incentives to recycle, people would just throw these away anywhere, and that includes our coasts and our oceans. So what happens when a bottle of glass is thrown in our coast? It can break, people get injuries, people bleed, and all this stuff ends up in our ocean, so that means that it also pollutes our marine life, it kills our marine life, and it contributes more to climate change. So, it's just a matter of equity as well, because a lot of our communities, especially environmental justice communities, make a living recycling these bottles and cans. So if we don't have a program that is there to serve our communities and make sure that they can make an equitable living. And that doesn't mean just people taking this to get recycled, but also the people who actually make other things out of these recycling bottles or cans and making sure they have a living wage. It is not working for anyone. And I think that's also one of the things that we're addressing when we're talking about the Green New Deal for not only the country, but the state and the city. We need to make sure that everyone can participate equally. And right now, none of this is working because everything is clearly broken by the way only the top people are making money out of this, and it's not really working either for our communities or for the environment. So things need to be changed. We need leadership from our governor. We need leadership from our city as well. And I'm calling on elected officials to please fix this system so that we can continue to enjoy California that is green. Thank you. ¿En español? Yeah. Estoy aquí de parte de Azul. Es una organización que nos encargamos de ver por el bien de las costas y del océano y también de la comunidad latina. Nosotros queremos que este servicio de reciclaje sirva para toda nuestra comunidad. Y no nada más estoy hablando de las personas que vienen y reciclan las cosas en los centros de reciclaje, que ya vimos que por lo menos 40% de estos centros han cerrado en los últimos 5 años, pero también de qué industria va a estar reciclando esto, en el sentido de que qué trabajos vamos a fomentar, sobre todo en esa nueva economía verde, del tratado de verde que estamos hablando, no nada más en cuestión nacional, pero también en cuestión de estatal y en cuestión de la ciudad. Entonces no se vale tener solamente una pequeña industria que se está beneficiando de esta cuestión tan triste y tan injusta, y necesitamos de veras que esto funcione para todos. El hecho de que 40% de los centros de reciclaje hayan cerrado los últimos 5 años no se vale. Necesitamos que estas botellas no terminen en nuestras playas, cortándole los pies a nuestra gente y terminen en el océano matando a la vida marina. Así que yo les urjo a nuestros, al gobernador y también a los, todos los legisladores de California que por favor arreglen este sistema que no está funcionando para el consumidor, que no funciona para la comunidad y que solo funciona para ahora sí que los ejecutivos que están a cargo de todo esto y que nos ayuden a nosotros y a nuestra comunidad. Muchas gracias.
Su nombre y su cargo, por favor.
Yo soy Andrea León Grossman y yo soy la Deputy Director con Azul.
Okay, we're gonna. I'm gonna open up the line, take questions. But before I do that, I just want to say.
The participant line.
I just want to say this: that there is legislation that Senator Henry Stern has in Sacramento right now that would create more exemptions for grocery stores not to take back empties. That's the wrong direction. That's not the right direction. He's also going to make some other changes that could help a bit, but these are really the type of changes we've seen in the legislature over the last couple of years. They're changes dictated by the grocery stores that don't want to take back the empties, dictated by the beverage companies who like getting rich the way things are and don't want an active regulator. They're dictated by the trash haulers who are very politically influential and apparently like to tie up people's cell phones, based on my experience today with backing up noises. You know, the reality is the special interests are getting rich at this trough and consumers are taking a bath. And what we got to do is reverse that. And I believe that this governor can fulfill some of his climate change mission by taking a department under his control, Cal Recycle, changing the culture, changing the incentives, changing the system. One big recommendation, 90% as a goal for redemption, for going into consumers' pockets. The redemption rate, the official 75% redemption rate, counts curbside redemption. Now that may be a technical term of art, but that ain't money we're redeeming, it's our money. So take off 12% from that. Take off another 10% for all the great people who are taking it out of our garbage cans, and that's fine. They can take it and get that money, but that's money we're not getting. So it works for the consumer, it works for the environment if we have centers to return our empties to. We got to open the centers, we got to spend the state money to keep the centers open. This is a crisis, and we also have to fundamentally realign the incentives in the system so that Cal Recycle isn't hoarding money, it's giving it on the centers. The haulers aren't making the type of money they are, rather than making sure it's going into the more sensible recycling. And the beverage companies aren't able to scam the system by taking money off the top and not get fined. Walmart in audits was responsible for $14 million in underreporting. It didn't pay a fine. It should have paid a fine, because otherwise you just keep doing it again. It was more than 14 million. So we're in a state where the governor's got to fix this. Senator Stern, I'm hopeful that he will be part of a Big Ten solution to fix the problem and not just throw another Band-Aid on the garbage heap. So we'll take questions from the room and then the line. We'll just alternate. Anyone in the room?
$308 million for administrative fees.
No. $308 million is the uncollected. I'll go back to that slide, John. To the $308 million is what is reported to the state as unclaimed consumer deposits. When you add back in from the $287 million they report, the administrative fees that they take out to pay the industry from the unclaimed deposit fund, because this is all money that starts with the consumer. $308 million is what the state's number for unclaimed deposits are. That doesn't include what's lost to the curbside haulers, lost to bulk collectors, or the scams that are taken right off the top from the beverage makers. When you add it all up, it comes out to the $732 million loss. But in terms of fees, it's 4% in fees that come out of the administrative fund that go to the beverage guys at the top for taking your nickel. They get 1.5% for taking your nickel, pretty good interest. In addition to everything else they pocket themselves. They're kind of like the casino in...
Guess what I'm leading up to is there's a lot of administrative
Yeah.
fees, but they don't get to where they're supposed to be? That
Yeah,
was-
yeah, the point is that when there's unclaimed deposits, that unclaimed deposit fund is used to pay for administrative fees and for other legitimate recycling programs, like scrap and other programs. That's where they take the money. So if the consumer doesn't get the money and it's back in the program, then that money pays someone to help recycling, or it sits in Cal Recycle's bank account. The reason Cal Recycle is sitting on not this 308 million, but 300 million in reserves, just money that's there, a balance, is because it's not spending money on recycling, it's hoarding the money. And in past administrations, that money, hundreds of millions, was borrowed from for the general fund by Governor Brown. And he took the money and put it in the general fund. He got caught in an audit and had to put it back. But this is a piggy bank for Sacramento politicians, and it's consumers' money, not even taxpayers' money. It's consumers' money that should get back in their pockets. Meanwhile, they're not paying redemption centers more to be open. They should take that 300 million and give it to the redemption centers to be open, or they should mail us all a check. But they shouldn't sit on it and use it to pay for their deficits. And part of the problem with the governor's administration in Sacramento is that even though I really believe he wants a fresh start, is many of the same people who are there were there during Brown. And those people shouldn't be the ones with voices at Cal Recycle.
Who are bulk collectors?
Bulk collectors are, okay, so well, the curbside collectors are the trash haulers. The bulk collectors are homeless guys who come to your can and take it out, maids who pick up cans and trash. We estimated for this calculation, and I think it's a low estimate after talking to the recycling centers, that 10% of the people who show up at the recycling centers are bulk collectors who it's not their cans, it's our cans. They're taking it out of the trash and getting it from somewhere else.
Is that a bad thing though?
It's not a bad thing, but it's a bad thing when you're putting it in the trash because you don't have a place to return it, or your kids are putting it in the trash because there's no center to go to return. It's not easy enough. It's a bad thing when Cal Recycle said people are donating their empties. That's great if they're truly donating it, but if they're donating it because they don't want to stand in line at a recycling center to get their money back, it is a bad thing for the consumer. It should be your choice. And the point of this calculation is to say, we can say we have a 75% redemption rate, but the reality is about half of it is going to someone else, and we're paying for it. We should have the option. The reason it's 90% redemption in those other states is there's more of a financial incentive for people to get a dime back than a nickel. Even my kids would much rather be doing this for a dime rather than a nickel.
But do they actually, in those other states, have more recycling centers?
Well, we're going to have one more question, then we'll go to the line in a second.
Do those other states that you're saying they're at the goal of 90% or plus actually have more recycling centers?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, here's the point. You're asking for more money to make this a, quote, affordable system for people to put their recycling centers out. To heck with the more money. The governor and the legislature can pass a law that tells every freaking supermarket and every SOB in the world, if you're selling that
take it back.
with a
Yeah, it's true.
That's right.
fee, you are mandated by law to have a recycling center. You don't need to boost the price on a recycled item to 10 cents.
That is one of the
You have to
recommendations.
mandate people.
That is one of the
You don't need
recommendations.
to raise another
And in
tax.
fact, grocery stores and they are required in underserved communities to take back the empties, except they can apply for an exemption. And the exemptions are rampant, and they shouldn't be able to get the exemptions. They should have to take them back. That's one of the
Kill the
recommendations.
exemption entirely.
That's right.
That's right.
That's right.
Okay, so that was Pete Demetrio. So I didn't want to let the line interrupt him because that would be to your he'd be worse than the trash haulers to have on your butt. Tell him. So let's go to the conference line. Yes, sorry, someone was raising their voice.
Okay. Yeah.
Say
hi.
your name, sorry, and
Deborah
where you're with.
Politico.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Who are you?
Yeah, Deborah Kahn.
Hi, Deborah.
Deborah Kahn with Politico. Hi. Yeah, I'm also confused about your kind of the problem and the proposed solution here, because having a lot of these recycling centers closed because communities find them to be a nuisance, and do you really think more people are you want people to go drop off their bottles at these recycling centers? Like, is that at all realistic? Are people actually going to do that? And if we raise the fee, won't the haulers just make more profits?
Well, we are saying that there should be a realignment so that the haulers are making less profits. But in LA, for instance, and often these redemption centers were in retailers' parking lots, and they're disappearing because the rent, for instance, in Los Angeles is very high. In some cases, they're getting evicted by the retailers. So these are different community solutions. There are different reasons redemption centers disappear, and NIMBYism may be true in a couple of these counties like Marin, but in places like LA, that is not actually true, so by and large. So the point is, we want to make, if consumers are going to get money taken out of their pockets for a bottle deposit, and it's not a tax, they need to have a viable way to get it back. If it's not a redemption recycling center, which we should work on making more efficient, then it should be the grocery store or the retailer where they got that can that has a mandate to take it. Regardless, our report recommends the legislature make a mandate to take it, whether it's in an underserved zone or not, and we come up with a system to do that. There is already a mandate to take it in underserved areas, but the state has not enforced it, in our view, because there are so many exemptions. And even, by the way, there's supposed to be $100 a day to be exempt. The fund balances, according to the Container Recycling Institute, don't match the number of exemptions. So this is really a mismanagement at the state of Cal Recycle issue. The first thing we need to do is clean up Cal Recycle. The second thing we need to do is make sure that the legislature focuses on big solutions, and we are not prescribing necessarily any one solution, but saying we need to get a 90% redemption rate goal and look at all the other states and all the other countries and do it better, because we're the only one doing it this way. Wait, let me see what Deborah. Is that answer, Deborah, or you're not?
Really? Well, I guess that not really. I mean, do you really think that people are going to start taking more of their bottles to these recycling centers?
Deborah, I think that if a person doesn't have to stand in line for 2 hours, yes, they would take them back. I live 4 blocks away from one in front of Pavilions, and I see people there every day. And I see people there who are, families who basically want extra cash. I see people who, are from small businesses that do this to supplement their small business. This idea of nuisance, the perception of nuisance, follow the money. Grocers and waste haulers are allied in their interests. The grocers don't want to have these centers at all. They don't want the responsibility of having to do any of this. And the waste haulers would rather have people think when we throw our stuff into our trash can, it is being recycled, when it's actually being contaminated to a large degree, So, think about it from that perspective.
Well, I would also say Andrea represents people who absolutely will do it for a nickel, but I'll tell you what, if you do it a dime, we will certainly get the redemption rate up, because successful states, these are well-off states in Michigan and Oregon. These are not they're not rural, poor states. When you up the redemption deposit, when you up the deposit to 10 cents, you do get more recycling. You get it. It becomes a much more viable. We haven't upped the deposit in the state in decades, right? So it's this is all part of the solution, but no one's focusing on the solution, because in Sacramento, it's not a street-level problem, it's an industry-level problem, and the industry is looking to get paid more, which unfortunately is what all the legislation is focused on. And let Andrea just talk to this question.
And let me just add one more thing. I mean, there's other kind of bottles that do have a higher redemption.
The bigger bottles are 10 cents or more.
Or even more. I mean, in terms of like organic milk, sometimes you pay up to like 50 cents, even $1 for that. And in higher end stores, and you have to bring back the bottle, and you reuse that bottle. So there's no reason why we couldn't incentivize more reusable bottles. And that way we don't only cut in energy use for these type of disposable bottles, we reuse that. And the more we reuse, the more efficiently we use energy and resources. And we really need to be thinking about single-use anything, plastics, glass. We are having a climate crisis right now, and we need to be thinking about really good solutions for this crisis that we have, and for good green jobs, and for our communities. What is our community going to be benefiting on? And right now, it's not working for our communities, it's not working for the environment. So, if it's 10 cents, if it's 50 cents, I mean, whatever it is that is going to incentivize people to bring these bottles back, and is going to basically benefit the consumer, not the industry.
Thanks. Anyone else got a question?
Jamie,
Yeah. Other than Pete DiMitriano, go ahead, Pete. One more, and then
I'm
we'll
losing a little bit of it here, because part of this is getting down to anything. When you're talking accounting, it gets down to the weeds. How is the average Californian losing money through the inefficiency of this program?
Well, the average Californian is plunking down Californians collectively, by our calculations, are plunking down $1.5 billion roughly for their bottles and cans, and they're only getting back 830 million of it, a little more than half. And so they're losing money at various levels.
And when you talk about the idea of getting back what?
They're getting back the dime or the nickel the nickel or the dime they plunk down for those bottles and cans. You're charged in the grocery line for the deposit. Increasingly, there are fewer and fewer ways for you to get it back, and as a result, people are being frustrated and throwing it away, and someone else is collecting it on their behalf, or it's becoming contaminated and not even recycled, which is a significant problem with curbside recycling. It is much more contaminated, and in fact, China recently said it wasn't taking a lot of our recyclables, and the city of Sacramento said until we can find a market for it, we're not going to recycle.
So in essence, what you're saying is that the $1.5 billion that Californians pay for the use of these cans and pay to fund a recycling program, the recycling program isn't really recycling to the maximum level it should be, that we're paying the deposits to have them do.
That's true. There's two reasons for the deposits, either for you to get them back or for the money that you deposited to be used to recycle to save the environment and fight against climate change. Neither of those things are happening. So if we're not, we should make it easier to get back the deposits, but also we should make that money available for recycling. The big fund balances should be used to open more recycling centers or to more efficiently recycle. Giving huge grants to curbside trash haulers is not efficient for the environment, and it's not good for the consumers. And that's the program. The program is helping the beverage makers, helping the curbside haulers, helping the grocery chains by not giving them costs to have to take back the cans and make it more convenient. The focus of this program should be consumer convenience, and if consumers have a convenient way to recycle and they don't do it, that money should be going to the state, but it should be used for recycling, not sitting in the bank account at Cal Recycle as a piggy bank for Sacramento politicians to borrow from for the general fund when they get short on dollars. It should be used for recycling, or it should go back in the consumers' pockets. Neither is happening. It's a scandal, and this governor should fix it if he wants to break with the terrible and tragic history of previous administrations. Another question from the line or in the room?
So in other words, it's another California government problem. They just don't handle big things like this. A lot of it goes to waste. Is it just another example of bad government just not doing what they say they're supposed to do?
I would say it's bad management. There are effective government agencies in the state of California. Cal Recycle hasn't acted like one to date in any public way, and part of the problem, frankly, is it's not very transparent. It needs to publish and put more data online about all these issues we're talking about. It needs to be more transparent about its audit. We could not find a fine going back in 5 years on publicly posted press releases. We presume that means they haven't fined any of the beverage makers who are taking from the state, but maybe they have. We don't know. So the reality is this is a management problem, and it is a government agency that's not doing its job, but part of it is regulatory capture. This agency, just like the previous legislatures, have been captured by the beverage makers, the curbside haulers, the grocery chains, the people who plunk down political contributions so they can take it out of your pockets on your bottle deposits. That should end, and that's what this report says. Anybody on the line, or are we going to call it quits and do it? All right. Nobody on the line wants to speak?
Yeah, I mean...
Deborah still hasn't had her answer question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'm still just... It just seems really unrealistic that people would actually bring their bottles back to a place to redeem it. I mean, no one's going to do that, right?
Well, where do you live? What city do you live in? What city do you live in?
I live in San Francisco.
Well, okay. In San Francisco, there's very, very few places to bring back your empties. And if you if you want to leave them in the trash and make a choice to stand in line, I mean, we had a very interesting closing of a recycling center in San Francisco that'll tell you exactly the impact on the community. And Andrea can talk to us. Yes,
you know, years and years, I mean, about, 15 years ago, I used to have a grocery store near me where they had redemption machines. And you just go in, it was automated machine. You just go in, you put in your can or your bottle, and it issue a receipt, and at the end of your shopping trip, they just gave you that credit. And that was, I mean, they didn't even, have to do much. And
you know what? They used to have that in California.
Yeah.
But this program is so frustrating that the people who make those machines pulled out. it's an insane system. So the fact is, Deborah, it's not your job, it's not my job, it's not Andrea's job to figure out how to make it more convenient. It's Cal Recycles, and all we know is it's less convenient and less of the money's going to recycling. And whether you buy that people should get their money back or want it, or whether you believe that that money should instead go to recycling, neither of the two is really happening.
I think people just kind of see it as a tax at this point. I mean, there's no expectation.
Well, then call it a
It's not a
tax.
tax.
Well, that's
Call
exactly
it
right. Call it a tax. That's exactly right. If you
Change
want to
it.
make it, you're exactly right. If you want to make it a tax, be honest about it.
Right.
But it's not a tax. And by the way, it does work in 9 other states and many countries. And we are not, I mean, it is actually a great thing for schools. It's a great thing for kids. It's a great thing for scholastic programs. It's a great thing for communities, low-income communities of people of color. But you can't innovate in recycling, either through machines or through community service or civic service, until you have a cooperative agency that provides places to recycle. It's a civics lesson. It's an environmental lesson. But if you don't have a center where you can get your stuff turned in a short order, how are you going to do it? In one place in California, you got to drive 161 miles to get to a recycling center.
Right.
That's impossible. So you can, whatever your faith or not faith
Yeah.
is in human nature, the garbage of government is to make it possible and see if it works. And it does work elsewhere. We don't need to get rid of these laws. We need to fix them.
Right. And I may add.
Yeah, but
some, some of this recycling, I mean.
What I was going to say is if you increase the tax,
It's
if you
not a
increase
tax.
it to 10 cents, then wouldn't you just get more? I mean, sure.
Well, you got to do no. We said
consider.
consider 10 cents in conjunction with getting to a 90% redemption rate that truly gets more money in consumers' pockets or use it for recycling. Only if you really fix this program. You don't just do 10 cents so it can go to the curbside haulers. You do 10 cents to make it incentives to fight for the environment and to get money back to the consumer.
And I want to emphasize one more thing in terms of our communities and how they get affected, because it's not only landfills that end up receiving some of these recyclables, because we're running out of land to throw this out. They end up also in incinerators. And these incinerators end up being in communities of color, communities where immigrants live, and that's just not fair. And this is contributing more to climate change. So we really need to fix this system.
Yeah. Thank you all. And if you want to chat afterwards, we're around on the numbers below, unless you're a trash hauler backing up your truck, and you don't have to call me again. Okay, thank you all. What's that?
It's
Getting
online.
a
I
damn
haven't
fee,
rolled
paying a recycle or redemption fee,
It's to recycle.
is to finance the process
Okay.
of allowing
you're talking about?
recycling of recycling.
Yeah, we share these out.
Rent costs too much to put a recycling center.
Well, unless it can if the money that's meant to be used for recycling is being saved for something else when it could be used it wouldn't be too expensive for a recycling center.
You want a 100% throughput with that $1.5 billion to basically go and establish at every supermarket
Nearby here?
Yeah.
a recycling center on the spot where there's a living, breathing human being
Yeah.
who will weigh the amount of the bottles away and say, you get $15.